Hello, everyone. It's Charlie and Sherry from Just Cruising Plus in Brentwood, Tennessee. Today, we're going to talk about the reasons for taking a river cruise. I think you're going to be excited and you're going to pick up some very valuable information that you'll be able to use going forward. Sherry, take it away.
Hi, you all have probably seen all of the wonderful ads that Viking River Cruises ran on Downton Abbey. Before those ads ran, there was some interest in river cruising, but nothing like what we have seen since then. Just as when Carnival Cruise Lines ran their ads about We've Got the Fun with Kathy Lee Gifford back in the 80s, it increased people's awareness of and desire to go on ocean cruises. Well, the ads that Viking ran on Downton Abbey did exactly the same thing. It made people aware of all of the wonderful experiences that they could have on river cruises. The river cruise industry right now is the fastest growing sector of the cruise industry in total, in ocean as well as in river cruising. A river cruise is all about visiting destinations. It's whether you're going to Siem Reap in Cambodia and Vietnam, or visiting the Great Wall of China, or going to Paris and taking a river cruise out to Normandy or through the lavender and sunflower fields in southern France, maybe even going to Russia, or taking a river cruise in the US and visiting St. Louis, or possibly something on the lower Mississippi down in the Louisiana area. It's all about the destinations. A river cruise is also very easy. You pack and you unpack once, just like you do on an ocean cruise. You don't have to worry about taking your luggage from place to place. It's just that one time. There's also no formality. It's country club casual. Nighttime wear for gentlemen is usually just a pair of slacks and an open collar shirt. For ladies, it can be slacks and a top, or it could be a skirt, whatever you desire, but it's nothing formal to it. The only time that you might have something a little dressier would be if you were doing, for instance, a concert in Vienna at one of the opera halls. River cruise is also very low key. There's no casinos, there's no bingo, there's no beer drinking contest or belly flop contests. Instead, you have lectures on the different destinations where you're going. You might have a cheese tasting or a wine tasting or a beer tasting, a sausage tasting if you're in Germany. It can be any numbers of things, but it's going to be much more low key than what you would have on an ocean cruise. A river cruise is also like taking a motor coach tour where you see multiple destinations, but it's much more upscale and it's far more superior and definitely more comfortable. As you can see, the one picture shows an example of a cabin on a river cruise ship, and the other is one of the lounges on a ship. So it gives you a basic idea of the type of luxury that we're talking about. A river cruise is also very relaxing. It's educational. You get to meet a lot of people, so it's a very social type cruise. It's also a lot of fun, and it's very inspirational. The day that we took our excursion out to the beaches at Normandy and visited the American Cemetery and got to learn about everything that happened on D-Day, it was probably one of the most emotional and inspirational days that we've ever spent.
So, what are some of the differences between an ocean cruise and a river cruise? Ocean cruises, if you think about it, take you to countries, but river cruises take you through countries. And that's a big difference that we're going to talk about. The Comparing an ocean cruise to a river cruise is like comparing apples and oranges. And in fact, they probably should have different names. But it's okay to call it an ocean cruise, but the reality is that a river cruise is more of a river journey. Some more differences. They both share extreme efficiency. The time is spent exploring instead of hauling your stuff between destinations. The 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 motor coach tour is what you think of a lot of times of living out of a suitcase. You can do so much more as you go to those new places you've ever been, and you don't have to drive. And I hate driving because if we go on a drive vacation, I know who's not going to see anything. Or if you go by a motor coach, there's some places that you can only go by motor coach, and we've enjoyed those. But I far prefer taking a river cruise, and that's where it ends. These are two words that are hard to differentiate: see and not see, but there's a big difference. The rivers that you're going to go along take you in and around and through bends that sometimes double back on themselves. But the thing that they share in common is that they go through the heart of the countries that you're going to visit, and you're going to visit several of them. You're going to go past castles, and you can see that some of these castles are hundreds of feet above the river. In fact, a lot of them I've looked at and wondered how they managed to get the building materials up there to build them in the first place. And having gotten up there, why would you stay, and how do you get provisions? But anyway, the architecture is just magnificent, and you'll see vineyards on the mountainsides as you sail down along the rivers. You'll see small villages of 400 or 500 people, or capital cities. You go through Vienna, or you go to Budapest, and everything in between. It'll give you a panoramic view of the old world that you're not going to be able to see otherwise in the same level of convenience and comfort. And it's that simple. Part of it is that you're always a few feet from shore. Now, yes, if you're on a motor coach, you're no feet from shore, but everything's going by at 60 miles an hour. Whereas with river cruise, you're headed down the river at 12, 15, 16 miles an hour, and you don't whiz by something so fast that you can't get a good look at it. Another feature of a river cruise, a river journey, compared to an ocean cruise, is that because the river was a primary means of transportation in the past, the wharfs, the docks for the river ships, whether they're passenger ships or freighters or cargo vessels or whatever, are right there in the city. And you have quick, easy access to all the ports that you'll come across. And in fact, what you're doing is you're sailing on the Middle Ages ancient highways. You keep in mind that 400 years ago, the rivers of Europe were in fact the commercial methods of transport. They were the interstates. That's how people got from one place to another, or ship freight was on the rivers.
That picture is actually in Egypt
Now,
on
yeah,
the
it is.
Nile.
Yeah, yeah. That's a Nile cruise, and it's interesting. We won't go into it today, but in another session, we're going to talk about all the many places you can go and the things that will set them apart for you. Now
Now,
look at
let's
ocean.
look at this. Let's
Yeah.
look at this. The difference in a river cruise and an ocean cruise is one is a boutique and the other is big. So ocean cruises are designed for large scale. They are many, many hundreds, thousands of tons, and they hold thousands of people, where a river cruise is designed for a very small scale. On an ocean cruise, you'll have people on board from babies, 6 months old, up to people in their 90s. On a river cruise, the average age is going to be over 50. Now, we are seeing a lot of interest now in families who want to travel together, especially since Adventures by Disney now charters ships from AMA Waterways, and they have their Adventures by Disney on board the ships. AMA has got cabins that are adjoining, where mom and dad could be in one cabin, the kids could be in another. They also have, AMA, as well as some of the other cruise lines, have cabins that will accommodate 3 and 4 passengers. So it is becoming more commonplace to see families on board a ship. And in fact, Charlie and I have seen families traveling together with children who usually are in the 10 to 15-year age,
Yeah.
that kind of age group. Like I said, on an ocean cruise, you're going to have thousands of passengers on board. The average ocean cruise ship now is over 2,500 passengers, up to well over 6,000 passengers, just a small city actually. And then on a river cruise, you're going to have less than 200 passengers. So it's all a matter of scale that we're dealing with. On an ocean cruise, you're going to have multiple dining and entertainment venues, and you'll have large stage productions. On a river cruise, there's going to be one main lounge, one main restaurant, possibly a specialty restaurant, and we are seeing more of the river cruise ships with specialty restaurants. And then they're going to bring on some local entertainment. So you may have a French chanteuse as you're sailing through the south of France, or you may have a German oompa band who comes on, or you may have some dancers from Hungary, from Budapest that come on board. But it will be local entertainment, not necessarily the big show entertainment like you're used to seeing on an ocean cruise. Ocean cruises also have large spas and multiple pools and a big workout center, and usually I'll even have like a running track up at the top of the ship. On a river cruise, it's going to be a very small spa that would probably accommodate 1 or 2 people, a very small workout center, and there's usually just one pool. There are some hot tubs on some of the ships, but most of the time it's going to be a much smaller scale.
Think of it this way, that the river journey is curated and not crowded. The the fact is that if you're on a ship that has 5 or 6 thousand people on it, even if you can pull right up to the pier, it's going to take a fair amount of time just getting on and off the ship because of the number of people that you're dealing with. Whereas with a river cruise, the design is such to maximize your shipboard and landside experience and minimize the hassles of getting on and off the ship. And for that reason, they have especially easy access when you do get into port in the cities and villages. On large cruise ships, even though they have multiple dining venues, what you're going to find is that there's 5,000 people that want to dine in all or some or most of those, and it may be that you can't get the time and the date that you want for the dining options, and you may have to settle for something else. With river cruises, everyone dines at the same time. You have, as Sherry mentioned, with the exception of one ship, you have a single dining room, and in some cases you'll have a specialty dining venue. But for the most part, everyone dines in the same place at the same time. You may have been in St. Thomas when there were 3 or 4 of the really big ships in town, and basically what that means is that you have 15,000 people that are in Charlotte Amalia at the same time in a little town that has a population of probably 3,000 at the most, when they don't have tourists or a cruise ship in town. The river cruise is just the design of the ship as such is to maximize your experience by making it easy to get around the ship. They're small, and getting on and off the ship is a breeze. As I said, everybody dines at the same time. You have fewer passengers in port. With an ocean-going cruise, the thing that you'll find is that some of those very popular shore excursions will sell out, especially if they involve motor vehicles or motor transportation. In Alaska, I'm thinking about the inflated boat trips and helicopter and flight seeing trips. Whereas on a river cruise, you're going to have exclusive excursions to historical landmarks. In the case of Grand Cayman, for example, Big ships can't port there, so you have to tender in. So you have the time to stand in line to get on a little boat and then go into the pier and stand in line to get on the pier and then come back and stand in line to get on a little boat. You get the idea. Whereas with river cruise, you literally walk off the gangplank into the heart of the city and you can begin exploring.
A river cruise is also immersive. So it's much more immersive than just being a sample of where you're going. On an ocean cruise, they are designed to bring American and North American culture on board. On a river cruise, it's a much more immersive experience of the local cultures. So where things are more Americanized on an ocean cruise, you're going to have the area of the world that you're traveling in a much deeper experience of that when you're on board a river cruise. On an ocean cruise, the food and the entertainment options are for people who want to sample at a safe distance. And this can be anything from some of the ocean cruises are serving meatloaf at dinner, or you might want to have a hot dog. At, on a river cruise, it's going to be food from the local, that is local cuisine, and it's going to be gourmet. So that when you're in Germany, for instance, you may have sausages and sauerkraut and German potato salad. But then when you get into France, you're going to have that wonderful French food. Or when you're in China, or when you're in Vietnam, and you can sample the foods of those regions as well. The onboard activities on an ocean cruise are just tremendous. There's no way you can do everything on an ocean cruise that you get in your daily bulletin that has a list of them. I mean, it's everything from trivia contests to bingo to you can learn how to paint. You can do all kinds of things. On a river cruise, it's more educational experiences, and you're going to have more history lecturers who will come on board to showcase the destinations. I think one of them that we will never forget, his name is Nigel. He's an English guy who lives in Normandy, and he is a scholar on D-Day. And he came on board our ship, and he did an afternoon lecture about D-Day, and he brought us all the way up to D-Day on what was happening and how the American and the Canadian and the Australian and the English, how all of them were preparing to come in for the D-Day invasion when they did it. He was just an incredible lecturer. On an ocean cruise, you might want to snorkel during the day, and then you don't want to get dressed up for dinner that night, and that's fine. So you go back and have pizza at the pizza parlor, or you go upstairs to the buffet. On a river cruise, the local guides are really going to bring the homeland to life. So instead of snorkeling and spending a day at the beach or sitting with a drink with a little umbrella in it, you're going to actually be experiencing the countries that you're in.
So, what about the budget? How much does luxury cost? Ocean cruises, regardless of the brand, have a reputation for keeping the cost down because they are able to spread the operating costs of the ship over a higher number of passengers. And most of these really large cruise lines can leverage their buying power to give the cruise passenger for an ocean going vessel a really pleasant experience at a price point that most everyone can afford. River cruises are more expensive, but we're going to talk about this a little more in detail in another slide. But river cruises are all about luxury for people who are looking for an experience. It doesn't mean that you have to be living in a no-tell motel to go see the things that you want to do and see the places you want to see. One of the big advantages of U.S. based ocean cruises is that it's economical to drive to New Orleans or Tampa, sometimes even as far as Fort Lauderdale, but certainly Port Canaveral or Charleston, that sort of thing. River cruises, with the exception of those that sail on rivers in the United States, do involve airfare getting to the departure point for the cruise, and that does add a little cost to it. But the river cruise is similar in that to an ocean cruise, in that it will have the least expensive cabins that still offer an immersive luxury experience. With an ocean cruise, you get the inside room, and it's 160, 70 square feet, and you turn the lights out as nighttime until you turn them back on it in daytime, and all the way up to 1,500 square foot luxury suites that cost more than I paid for my first house. On river cruises, the ships are designed to have more balconies or views so that you can get a more panoramic scene view of the countryside as it goes past, and offer you
Here are the top search results.
The best views of the areas.
So what's included and what do you have to pay for? Well, on an ocean cruise, you are sometimes nickel and dimed to death. You have to pay for excursions. You have to pay extra for beverage packages. You have to pay extra for specialty dining or for Wi-Fi. On a river cruise, everything is included in the experience. On your shore excursions, some of them are going to have meals included in those. Some will have wine tastings included. There's always beer and wine at lunch and dinner. On some of the ships, they have a complimentary cocktail hour. Some of them even have all of your beverages included. Specialty dining is usually included if it is available. And surprisingly enough, there are bicycles for adventurers who has no charge to use those either. You also, on an ocean cruise, you need to be prepared that you're going to have to spend extra. The fare may look much, much less than a river cruise, but when you add in all of these other things, it's about the same. So instead of you having to add the extras, now you're going to have everything included so that at the end of your cruise, end of your river cruise, there's not going to be any surprises.
So let's look at some more reasons that you want to take a river cruise. You're going to stop at a new port every day, or in some cases, you may go to a port and be in that port for 2 or 3 days, but use that as a hub and spoke arrangement to go out and visit other places in the countryside. Each and every river cruise itinerary offers unique destinations, and it's a totally other session to talk about those destinations. We're going to do that in the future. It's all about the vistas. It's all this is on the Rhine River in the Wachau Valley. I mean, the Danube River in the Wachau, and it's all about the vistas and less involved with sailing. One of the things that some people love is time at sea. If you're going to the Eastern Caribbean, you've got a day or two at sea to do nothing. Others don't like that because they feel like they're wasting their time. Well, they're going to be right at home on a river cruise, because you are indeed going to have more sea time on a river cruise than you ever would on the average ocean-going cruise. And again, I want to emphasize that you're going past these places when you're on board the ship. You're going past these places at 12, 15, 16 miles an hour, so that it's not like you whiz by something and didn't get a good look at it or have a chance to get your camera out and take pictures of it. You go through some just breathtakingly scenic stretches of the rivers. So Sherry mentioned that river cruises are all inclusive in some cases, mostly inclusive in others, and that you have beer, wine, and soft drinks included with lunch and dinner. And indeed, there are some that have a complimentary happy hour. And if you want spirits at dinner, there's an extra charge for that. There are other cruise lines that offer beer, wine, spirits, that sort of thing, 24/7. They all offer coffee and tea, and the ones that we enjoy the most have 24-hour a day espresso and lattes and cafe mocha and that sort of thing with uh, really delicious cookies of the region or donuts, that kind of thing, and bottled water. Something else that is important is that your cruise cost will include at least one shore excursion in each port. And for some of the lines, you'll have two shore excursions, one in the morning back to the ship for lunch, and then have another excursion in the afternoon, so that you're out and about and doing something and seeing new and exciting things more than you ever would be on a typical ocean cruise. Some of the other things that are included, if you've ever been on an ocean cruise lately, Wi-Fi is very expensive. Wi-Fi is included as part of your ticket price on a river cruise. Now, you need to remember that sometimes you're going to be sailing between tall mountains and going through river gorges and that sort of thing, so that the service might be interrupted where it wouldn't be on the open ocean, but it's free. And more importantly, there's no nickel and diming. You don't have constant announcements about going and buying this wine package or going to the table that has $1 an inch gold and all that kind of stuff. It's also not at all uncommon for the river cruise to include airfare, either included in the ticket price or deeply reduced. Uh, Nashville and other non-primary airports may have a slight add-on, but if you're looking at the major airports, Atlanta, Charlotte, Chicago, things like that, it's not at all uncommon for the airfare from those cities to be included in your ticket price. These are one-of-a-kind experiences. There are narrow parts of the rivers. You go through shallow waterways. There are some of them on the Saone and the Rhone River that there may be less than a foot draft beneath the hull of the boat. Because the rivers will ascend or descend as much as 2,000 feet in the length of the trip that you take, you'll have to go through locks and canals. And that's an adventure in itself. If you have any scientific or engineering interest, you're going to find that fascinating. The thing that's interesting is how you can have such different cultures in such a short space, and within a few miles have a totally different culture. And in fact, one example that comes to mind is Budapest in Hungary. Buda, as you face north, Buda is on the west bank of the river, and Pest is on the east bank of the river. And sort of like Minneapolis and St. Paul, even though they're that close together, their cultures are extremely different. And you can tell one from the other without any difficulty at all. But the most important part of this is that you're going to travel in luxury, and not you're not going to be nickel and dimed. You've heard of maximum return on investment. Well, let's talk about return on experience. And Sherry mentioned a minute ago that you may look at the first cost that you pay for your ticket, and then you have to add to that getting to the ship, and then you have to add to it your excursions and specialty dining and buying a drink package and on and on and on. If you've been on an ocean cruise, you know what I'm talking about. The return on experience that you get when you add up all the things that you would have to buy to have a good experience on an ocean cruise, you're going to find that the price differential when you're finished with your vacation is minimal, and your investment is going to be well rewarded. I'll guarantee you that in 10 years, you're going to remember the fun times that you had on the Rhine River a lot more than the fact that you spent another $300 or $400 or however much it was. The typical river lets you see different places in one single cruise. And that leads us to the fact that you can have unique excursions. These are truly historical sites. We're talking about villages that in the Middle Ages had 60,000 inhabitants, and now they have less than 6,000 because the river's not the main commercial means of getting around anymore. The other thing that, and Sherry touched on this, and you've seen a bunch of photographs in here that have bicycles. The excursions that you have are great, but the ship does sail from one point to another, and it's very common to take one of the bicycles that are furnished on the ship and ride along the road, the highway or the path that runs alongside the river, and meet the ship at its next port. And in fact, it's not at all uncommon that you can ride a bicycle faster than the ship's going. The thing that I'm a foodie. I love food adventure, and the thing that the first river cruise we took that convinced me that this was a new way to do things was when we saw our chef in the little village buying the produce that we had that night for dinner as he prepared regional dishes. Some of the cruise lines will have generic wines. Other cruise lines will have wines that are for the region through which you're sailing. But the thing that you can count on is a culinary adventure, if that is the kind of thing that you like. Solid, down to earth, good food with an adventure. So if you want a smaller vessel, if you want a more intimate vacation experience, if going somewhere with 5,000 of your newest best friends isn't your idea of a fun thing to do, then you really need to take a look at a river cruise. The other thing that you're going to find is that because the ship is small, the staff is going to have more time to focus on each guest, and you'll find that the bar waiter knows that you want a particular drink when you come in, or your waiter, if you sit at the same table every night at dining, your waiter knows that he needs to bring you a glass of iced tea with a lot of lemon, and on and on. It's that focused.
So where do all of these river cruises go? Well, the international river cruises will go all over Europe. I mean, from the rivers in France, the Seine River, the Saône and the Rhone River. In Germany and Switzerland, you'll have the Rhine. You can do the Danube from Prague to Budapest, and even down to the Black Sea. You can do the Po River in Italy, or you can do the Douro River in Portugal. There's so many rivers in Europe that you'll be able to cruise on and have a totally different experience on each one. There's also river cruises in the Amazon now, so that's another whole area. And one I left off here was the Galapagos, because the Galapagos is another river cruise experience that the river cruise companies are doing. You can do China, you can do Russia. We even have river cruises now in Egypt where you'll be able to go out to the pyramids. And then you can do Southeast Asia to Vietnam and Cambodia. And we have a lot of Vietnam vets who are very, very interested now in going back to visit Vietnam to see it as it is now, rather than like it was in the 60s when they were stationed there. There's also river cruises in the US, and these will go to the Pacific Northwest and to Alaska. And so when they do Alaska, they're going to do the coastal part of Alaska, but they're going to go more inland where you will get to see some of the smaller ports of Alaska that you wouldn't see on a large ocean cruise. You also can cruise on the Mississippi River, and the Mississippi is from New Orleans all the way up to Minneapolis, or vice versa. And you can do segments of the Mississippi River. So you could do part of it that would be just round trip in New Orleans, for instance. You can do Canada and New England. And this has become very, very popular with the river cruises in the US. Same thing in the Southeast. You can now, the river cruises in the Southeast, for instance, in Tennessee, You can do rivers on the Cumberland River, the Mississippi, and even the Tennessee River, the Ohio River. So it's hitting a number of rivers in that area. In the Southeast, you especially want to do one that's maybe New Orleans to Memphis. Like I said earlier, you can do St. Louis. We did one from St. Louis over to Louisville. And so you can do some different itineraries on the rivers within the U.S. These are the river cruise lines that primarily cater to North American citizens. So you'll have Uniworld, which is a boutique river cruise line. There's Viking, that you probably all heard of. There's AMA Waterways, and they're the ones that I told you that have the cabins that will accommodate families. There's Avalon Waterways, and Avalon's unique because all of their cabins that they have are called the suite ships, and the beds face the water, and you actually have a French balcony in each cabin. There is Emerald Waterways, and then we have the three luxury lines would be Talc, Crystal, and Scenic Luxury Cruises. Then within the U.S., we've got two river cruise companies, American Cruise Lines and American Queen Steamboat Company. So you've got a large choice of different cruise lines. We're going to be doing a part 2 of this series on river cruises, where we're going to go into the differences in the different cruise lines, because just as there's differences in ocean cruises, differences in hotels, even differences in the cars that we drive, there's differences in river cruise lines as well. And this way we can possibly help you in choosing the one where you're going to feel the most comfortable and you would have your expectations exceeded. We started out with the talking about Downton Abbey and what Downton Abbey and Viking did for river cruising. And we're going to close with Downton Abbey also. Mr. Carson, who was one of my absolute favorite characters on that series, had a quote that says, "The business of life is the acquisition of memories. In the end, that's all there is." Mr. Carson was so right. I think all of us are right now ready to get out and explore and enjoy again. And all we have is to make memories. So coming soon, we're going to have part 2 on how to choose a river cruise. In the meantime, if you need to reach us, here's our phone numbers, here's our web address, and here's our email address. We'd love to talk with you about a river cruise. And any of our agents or Charlie and I either would be happy to help you and answer any of your questions. We just want to thank you so much for being with us today, and we look forward to seeing you and having you join us on some of our other seminars that we do. Thank you all.
Have a safe day.